Hello everyone in Cyber World. I'm Richard, also known as Mr. Poorman.
And I'm Jennifer, also known as Mrs. Poorman.
Welcome to our channel we call Poorman's DIY.
This week we're introducing our video from Diamond Head State Park. This is what we made this week, our fabulous wall-mounted coat rack.
Let's take a look at how we did this exactly. And with that, cue music.
We had to make small enough origami to fit inside the knobs, so Mr. Poorman cut down 2 by 2 inch pieces of paper.
I started off by making a crane, which I have made thousands of over the years. Next, I made a very simple butterfly. And for the last origami animal, I made a cute little fish.
Mr. Poorman first added the epoxy, then he placed the origami animals into the mold. Then he filled the rest of the mold with epoxy.
I then cut off a small portion on the back of each knob. I added the knobs back into the mold and added a black epoxy to hide the screws that I was going to add.
When we took the knobs out of the mold, they weren't very pretty, so we have to prepare them for sanding and polishing.
I started off with some coarse grit sandpaper to get rid of the imperfections. Unfortunately, this process scuffs up the knobs quite bad, so the next process is to use wet sanding to clean it up. After wet sandpaper, I started using car compound to begin to buff it out. After the compound, I used a cutting polish. Next, I use a polish, but I ran into a problem. Wait for it.
All that work finally paid off. It is so beautiful.
I then cut some tubing that will be used to hide the threads of the screws. Mrs. Poorman took over the project and started cutting the wood. And then she drilled pocket holes.
Mr. Poorman then made keyholes with the rattle. Then he cleaned the live edge.
And now, everyone's favorite, it's sanding time.
After the sanding, we assembled the coat rack.
The next process was to pre-drill holes for the knobs.
Mr. Poorman then finished placing the knobs in the coat rack.
All that's left now is to prepare to hang the coat rack on the wall.
So we hope you enjoyed that video. We had a really good time making our coat rack. Unfortunately, there are probably some things that we might have done a little bit different.
Say for example, we're going to actually epoxy the top shelf and the bottom shelf to make it pop more, to give it vibrancy and color. And
We're epoxy wood fans.
yes, of course,
Okay.
of course.
In addition, the balls that I made, the knobs, I used a black ink for the epoxy in the background. Unfortunately, what it did was, the idea was to hide the bolts, but it also was so dark that the origami paper didn't stick out as well, so you couldn't see them as nicely as we would have liked to. So if I were to redo this, I'd probably use a light color ink in the epoxy, enough that it would still hide the bolt and still allow the origami to be a little more visible and go pow. Right.
Correct. Next week we're going to show you how we're going to make dividers for our kitchen, our shelving in the kitchen or the drawers.
Kitchen drawers, yeah.
Kitchen drawers, I'm sorry. But what it is we're going to take the dividers and divide up our knives and forks and spoons and all of our utensils to make it more organized.
Okay, so until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.